One pot, one plant, and two pieces of carbon fabric buried in wet soil. That is all it takes. Within 2 to 3 weeks, a small LED light begins to glow. Not from a battery, not from a solar panel, not from anything plugged into your wall, but from dirt, from a living plant doing what living plants have always done. The light stays on at night. It stays on when clouds block the sun for days. It stays on because the electricity is not coming from the sky. It is coming from the roots. Researchers at one of the most respected agricultural universities on Earth proved this works. A Dutch company used it to light over 300 streetlights. And the only reason you have not been harvesting voltage from your houseplants this entire time is that nobody connected the dots for you until today. By the end of this video, I will show you the exact 5-minute setup that turns any pot into a living battery. But first, you need to understand what has been happening beneath every plant you have ever owned. Because once you see it, you will never look at a pot of soil the same way again. If you have ever looked at a house plant sitting quietly on your windowsill and assumed it was doing nothing but looking green, you are about to discover something that changes how you think about biology, energy, and what is genuinely possible with a bucket of mud. There is a process happening right now as you listen to this in the soil of every potted plant on Earth. A process so fundamental to life that it has been running continuously for hundreds of millions of years. And buried inside that process is a stream of raw electricity that we have been walking over, gardening in, and completely ignoring for the entirety of human civilization. The first scientist to prove that living organisms produce electricity was a professor at the University of Durham in England named Michael Crichton Potter. In 1911, over a century ago, he published a paper demonstrating that microbes could generate measurable electrical current. The scientific community essentially ignored him. The technology to capture this from living plants was first demonstrated in 2008. It has been validated by peer-reviewed research published in journals that the global scientific community takes very seriously, and it requires no fuel, no moving parts, and no maintenance beyond watering your plant. The plant does all the work. You just have to know where to put the wires. Here is what is actually happening beneath the surface of every pot of soil you own, and it is far stranger than you might expect. We are taught in school that photosynthesis is elegant and efficient. Sunlight hits the leaf. The plant takes carbon dioxide from the air and water from the soil. Using the sun's energy, it forges these simple ingredients into glucose, sugar, the fuel of life. Clean, simple, beautiful. But that version of the story leaves out something enormous. Plants are wildly overproductive. They manufacture far more sugar than they can possibly use for their own growth, and they do not store the excess. They pump it out through their roots directly into the surrounding soil. Research published across dozens of universities worldwide has established that plants release between 5 and 21% of all the carbon they fix through photosynthesis directly out through their root systems. Some studies measuring specific species under certain conditions have documented losses as high as 40%. Think about that. Up to 1/5 of everything a plant builds from sunlight gets deliberately pushed into the dirt. This is not a design flaw. It is not waste. It is a strategy that has been refined by evolution over 400 million years of land-plant history. Here is how the strategy works. And this is where it starts to get extraordinary. The sugars that leak from the roots attract bacteria, not a few bacteria, billions of them per gram of soil. They swarm the root zone, an area scientists call the rhizosphere, and they feast on the sugars the plant is offering up. In exchange for the meal, the bacteria break down minerals locked inside soil particles and convert them into forms the plant can absorb. Nitrogen, phosphorus, iron, zinc, manganese, nutrients the plant desperately needs but cannot extract on its own, are suddenly delivered on a silver platter by microbes that are being paid in sugar. This is a biological marketplace, a symbiotic economy, and it has been operating beneath every meadow, every forest, every wheat field, and every garden bed on this planet for longer than any human structure has existed. But here's the part that matters for what we are building today. And this is the detail that the energy world has been remarkably slow to acknowledge. When those bacteria digest the plant sugars, the chemical reaction does not just produce nutrients for the plant. It releases protons and electrons, loose electrons, Raw electrical charge. In normal soil, those electrons are immediately snatched up by oxygen molecules or other chemical compounds lurking nearby. The energy dissipates as low-grade heat into the surrounding earth. It vanishes, gone, irrecoverable. Every potted plant you have ever owned has been leaking electricity into its soil for its entire life. Every lawn on your street is doing the same thing right now. Every rice paddy in Southeast Asia, every cattail marsh in the American Midwest, every mangrove coast in the tropics is hemorrhaging electrons that nobody is collecting. The leak is real, it is continuous, it is global. And in 2008, a team of environmental engineers at Wageningen University in the Netherlands figured out how to intercept it. The technology is called a plant microbial fuel cell. The name sounds complex, but the principle borders on elegant. You create two distinct zones inside a container of wet soil, an oxygen-free zone at the bottom and an oxygen-rich zone near the top. You bury a piece of electrically conductive carbon material in that bottom zone. That is your anode, your negative electrode. The bacteria living down there eat the sugars the plant roots are continuously pumping into the soil. Normally, those bacteria would hand their waste electrons off to oxygen, and the energy would vanish as heat. But you have removed the oxygen from that zone by packing the soil wet and tight. The bacteria are stuck with a full load of electrons and nowhere to dump them. So they look for the next best conductive surface available. They find your carbon electrode. And here is where this crosses the line from interesting chemistry into something that will make you want to send this to someone. The bacteria do not simply sit near the electrode and hope for the best. They physically wire themselves to it. A species called Geobacter sulfuriducens, which is naturally present in most soils on Earth, produces protein filaments called electrically conductive, PLE or EPLE. These are nanowires, actual nanoscale electrical wires, grow directly out of the bacterium's body, extend outward, and physically attach to the carbon surface of your electrode. Scientists at the University of Massachusetts first described these structures in 2005 in the journal Nature, one of the most prestigious scientific publications in the world. Since then, scanning tunneling microscopy has confirmed that these bacterial nanowires conduct electrons with a linear ohmic response. That means they behave like actual metallic wire. A bacterium smaller than a human blood cell grows conductive cables out of its own body and plugs itself into your electrode like it is connecting to a power outlet. Once attached, the bacteria multiply. They recruit neighbors. They form a dense living coating on the carbon fibers called a biofilm. This biofilm is the engine of the entire system. Thousands of bacteria, each one wired in, each one dumping electrons onto the anode, each one converting plant sugar into electrical current. The electrons accumulate on the carbon felt. They want to reach the oxygen at the surface, but the soil blocks them. The only escape route is the wire you have connected to the anode. They rush up through the wire through whatever small device you have connected and arrive at the cathode, the second electrode sitting near the soil surface. There they finally meet oxygen, combine with protons from the soil water, and form a molecule of pure H2O. Water. That is the entire cycle. Sunlight hits the leaf makes sugar, the roots push sugar into the soil, bacteria eat the sugar, electrons flow through your wire, water forms at the top, no combustion, no degradation, no pollution, no fuel consumed. The plant keeps growing, the bacteria keep reproducing, the sun keeps shining. This is not a battery that runs down. It is a living metabolic engine that sustains itself for as long as the plant is alive. A single pot produces roughly 0.3 to 0.7 volts. I am going to be direct with you because I think you deserve honesty. That is not going to power your refrigerator. One pot is not going to charge your phone. Anyone who claims otherwise is exaggerating the current state of the technology. But a single pot will register measurable voltage on a multimeter. And a single pot wired to a low-power LED will produce a faint but continuous glow from nothing but a living plant in wet soil. No batteries, no charging, no expiration date. And what one pot does alone, many pots do together. That is the principle the Dutch engineers proved when they went big. In November of 2014, a company called Plantee launched a project they called Starry Sky. Plantee was a direct spin-off from the Wageningen University research, co-founded by Marjolein Helder, who developed the technology during her doctoral work, and David Strick, the researcher who first proposed combining plants with microbial fuel cells. For the Starry Sky project, they installed modular plant containers across an old military ammunition site near Amsterdam called Hembrugge. Each module contained native aquatic plants growing in soil fitted with carbon electrodes underneath. They connected the modules in series and parallel. They ran the wires. And on a November evening, with a crowd standing in the park looking up, over 300 LED lights came on, powered entirely by living plants and the bacteria feeding on their roots. Not a single solar panel, not a single wind turbine, not a single connection to the electrical grid. The grass was already there. The soil was already there. The bacteria were already there. Plantee simply buried the mesh and collected what nature had been giving away for free. A second installation went live near Wageningen. They demonstrated cell phone chargers running on plant power, Wi-Fi hotspots running on plant power. The World Economic Forum named Plantee a technology pioneer. A designer named Ermi van Oors took this even further. She created a consumer product called the Living Light, a table lamp powered entirely by a single potted plant. No cable, no battery, no socket, just a peace lily in a hand-blown glass vessel with a carbon electrode buried beneath its roots. You touch the leaf, a sensor detects it, and the lamp glows. The electricity comes from the plant's own metabolism. She presented it at TEDx Amsterdam, and the room went dark and the plant began to glow. She then partnered with the city of Rotterdam to create a 35-meter path through a public park lit entirely by the plants already growing along it. Every lamp powered by the vegetation beside it. A walking trail in a European city illuminated by biology. No power lines, no trenching, no electrical infrastructure whatsoever. Just dirt, roots, bacteria, and carbon mesh. If that image does not make you stop and rethink what a plant actually is, I do not know what will. Now here is where the numbers start to rearrange how you think about land. Current plant microbial fuel cells generate 0.4 watts per square meter of plant growth area. That sounds almost negligibly small, but the Wageningen research team calculated the theoretical maximum output at 3.2 watts per square meter. At that density, a green roof measuring 100 square meters, roughly 1,076 square feet, could generate 28 kilowatt hours per square meter per year. Enough electricity to power an average household in the Netherlands. Imagine every flat rooftop in your city planted with sedges and grasses growing quietly in the rain and underneath carbon mesh, silently harvesting the electrons the plants are giving away. No visual impact, no noise, no moving parts, no emissions. The building grows a rooftop garden on top and generates electricity underneath. But scale it even further. A doctoral thesis completed at Wageningen in 2020 specifically investigated plant microbial fuel cells embedded in rice paddy fields. Rice paddies are naturally flooded. The soil at the bottom is already anaerobic. The conditions for a plant microbial fuel cell exist in every rice paddy on Earth without any modification. The research confirmed that paddy-based plant microbial fuel cells generate usable electricity while the rice crop continues to grow normally. A farmer harvests rice and electricity from the same field at the same time, with no reduction in food yield. There are an estimated 160 million hectares of rice paddies worldwide. Even at today's modest power densities, underlying a meaningful fraction of that acreage with carbon mesh electrodes represents an energy source that starts to register in gigawatts, and it requires burning nothing. So why have most people never heard of this? 3 reasons, and understanding them explains not just this technology, but how promising ideas get stranded between the laboratory and your living room. The first reason is power density. 0.4 watts per square meter simply cannot compete with solar panels generating 150 to 200 watts per square meter in direct sun for grid-scale energy. The math does not add up yet. Engineers know this. Researchers know this. The technology is not being hidden. It is being developed. The gap between current output and theoretical maximum is where the real work is happening in labs in the Netherlands, in field trials across Asia, and in a growing number of university programs worldwide. The second reason is economic structure. The global energy industry is built around centralized generation and distribution. Power plants, transmission lines, substations, meters, monthly bills. A technology that generates tiny amounts of electricity at the point of use from plants that are already growing with no fuel cost and no moving parts does not fit neatly into that model. Not because it threatens anyone, but because it is genuinely difficult to build a business around a process that happens for free and dirt. There is no fuel to sell. There is no consumable to replace. The bacteria do not require a subscription. They eat sugar and dump electrons regardless of who owns the patent. The third reason, and this one is the most frustrating, is the material gap. The critical component, carbon felt, is an industrial material. It is not sold at your local hardware store. It is not stocked at garden centers. If you walk into any home improvement store and say you want to build a plant battery, you will get a blank stare. The average person who hears about this technology and tries to replicate it with whatever is lying around the house, say 2 copper nails and a potato, builds a crude chemical battery that corrodes, poisons the soil, and dies within days. They conclude the whole concept is a hoax. The failure was not the science. The failure was the materials. And because the correct materials exist outside the normal consumer supply chain, most people never get a fair chance to see it work. Fortunately, those materials are a single online search away, and they cost less than you would spend on a bag of potting soil. So the research continues in academia, the demonstrations accumulate, and the consumer market waits for someone to package it. You do not have to wait. Here is exactly how to do it. I want you to understand something before I begin. What I am about to describe will sound too simple. You will think I am leaving steps out. I am not. The reason this works is that the bacteria already exist in your soil. The plant already produces the sugar. The electrochemical reaction is already happening in every pot you own. All you are doing is giving the electrons a path to follow and a reason to flow through your wire instead of vanishing into the dirt. Here is what you need. Non-metal container. Any non-metal waterproof container that holds soil and stays wet. A plastic bucket or a large plastic nursery pot works well. Avoid metal containers because they interfere with the electrochemistry. Drill or punch one small hole near the base for your wire to exit. Seal the hole with silicone or waterproof tape afterward. Carbon felt. Carbon felt is a lightweight, flexible fabric made of pure carbon fibers. It is electrically conductive, biologically inert, and it does not corrode. Its fibrous structure gives bacteria an enormous surface area to colonize. One piece is your anode at the bottom and one is your cathode at the top. You can find carbon felt on most major online retailers. A sheet large enough for this project costs between $8 and $15. Cut 2 pieces roughly the size of your container bottom. Wire. You need 2 lengths of wire that will not corrode in wet soil. Stainless steel wire is easy to find and works well. Titanium wire is ideal for maximum longevity since it is completely inert. But stainless steel will last for years. Do not use copper. Copper corrodes in wet soil, releases toxic ions, and poisons both the bacteria and the plant. It is the reason most backyard experiments fail. The wrong wire kills the biology. Peace lily. Pick a species that loves wet roots. The peace lily, Spathiphyllum, is the best choice for a home setup. It is widely available, tolerates low light, thrives in wet soil, and has an aggressive root system that will colonize the carbon felt rapidly. Umbrella papyrus, cyperus, is an excellent alternative. Do not attempt this with succulents or cacti. They do not pump enough sugar to fuel the bacterial engine. Compost in soil. Potting soil mixed with a handful of mature compost. The compost introduces diverse microbes that accelerate biofilm formation. Separator. A layer of fine sand or damp peat moss for separation between the anode zone and the cathode zone. Multimeter. A basic digital multimeter to track your voltage, about $10. LED. A low-power red LED. Here is the 5-minute setup. Lay your first piece of carbon felt flat on the container bottom. Weave your first wire through the felt so it makes firm distributed contact with the fibers. Run the wire out through the bottom hole. This is your anode. Fill the container about 1/3 full with wet soil mixed with compost. Pack it down firmly. Press out air pockets. This layer must become oxygen-free. The wetter and tighter you pack it, the faster the microbes consume the remaining oxygen and create the anaerobic conditions the system needs. Add about 1 inch of damp sand or peat moss on top. This is your separator. It slows oxygen from diffusing downward to the anode. Place your second piece of carbon felt on top of the sand. Weave your second wire through it. Run this wire up and out of the container. This is your cathode. Fill the remaining space with soil and plant your peace lily or papyrus directly into the top layer. Water thoroughly until the surface glistens. This system must stay consistently wet, not damp. Wet. The water is not just keeping the plant alive, it is the ion transport medium between the anode and the cathode. Without water, the electrochemical circuit breaks. If you go on vacation for a week and the soil dries out, the voltage will drop to near zero. But here is the beautiful thing about a living system. Water it again. Let the soil resaturate. And within a day or two, the bacteria resume and the voltage recovers. The biofilm does not die from temporary drought. It goes dormant. It waits. And when the water returns, it wakes up and gets back to work. One more practical note. If your voltage plateaus lower than you expected, the most common fix is adding a thin layer of fresh compost on top and watering it in. This feeds a new pulse of microbial activity down to the anode zone. Think of it as refueling the engine. The carbon felt lasts essentially forever. The wires do not degrade. The only thing the system ever needs more of is organic matter for the bacteria to eat. And a healthy plant provides most of that on its own through its roots. Now the hard part, waiting. And I mean this sincerely, the waiting will test you. On day one, your multimeter will read close to zero, maybe 2/100ths of a volt, maybe nothing. Do not touch anything. Do not rewire. Do not add anything to the soil. The system is not broken. The bacteria simply have not found the carbon felt yet. They are there in the compost you added and in the soil itself, but they have not colonized the electrode. They have not grown their nanowires. The engine has not started. Be patient. Keep the soil wet. That is your only job for the first week. By the end of week 1, the readings creep upward. 5/100ths of a volt, then 1/10. Something is happening down there in the dark. The bacteria are attaching to the carbon fibers. They are extending their conductive pili. The biofilm is beginning. By week 2, something shifts. You check the multimeter and the number has jumped. 0.2 of a volt, then 0.3. The anode zone has gone fully anaerobic. The bacterial colony is established, dense, and actively dumping electrons onto the carbon felt with nowhere else to send them. By week 3 to 4, most home setups stabilize somewhere between 0.3 and 0.7 of a volt. The reading holds steady, barely fluctuating, because the system has reached a living equilibrium. The plant pumps sugar, the bacteria eat sugar and release electrons. The electrons flow through your wire. Day and night, rain or shine, summer and winter, as long as the plant is alive and the soil is wet. This is not a battery that drains. It is a metabolic cycle that sustains itself. Connect your LED across the 2 wires and watch it glow. It will be faint from a single pot. That's honest. But let me tell you what it feels like the first time you see it. You have a pot of dirt, a plant you bought for $8, 2 pieces of carbon fabric, and 2 wires. There is no battery anywhere. There is no plug. There is no chemical reaction consuming itself. And a tiny red light is glowing in the dark, powered by nothing but the relationship between a plant and the invisible organisms living in its soil. Something about that moment is hard to put into words. It is not about the brightness, it is about the principle. You are watching biology generate electricity in real time. You are watching a process that has been running on this planet since before the dinosaurs, and you have simply given it a wire and a reason to show itself. Now, to get brighter light or to power anything more substantial, you stack. Connect 2 pots in series, the positive terminal of one to the negative terminal of the next, and your voltage doubles. 3 pots triple. 10 pots wired in series gives you 3 to 7 volts. That powers a bright LED array easily. That runs a small soil moisture sensor for your garden indefinitely. That feeds a low-power microcontroller or a small digital thermometer. Picture this in your mind. A shelf by your window with 5 peace lilies, each one sitting in its own bucket, each one wired to the next. The plants are green and healthy, doing what houseplants do, but underneath, invisible, a chain of living batteries is running. The combined voltage powers a strip of warm LED lights along the shelf. No plug, no cord running to the wall, no battery to change. The lights glow because the plants are alive. If a visitor asks where the lights are plugged in, you tell them they are plugged into the dirt and you watch their face. That is the kind of moment this technology creates. Scale it up. A classroom with 15 potted plants along the windowsill, wired together, powering a small weather station display that shows temperature and humidity. The children are not just watering plants, they are maintaining a power grid. They are watching voltage on a multimeter. They are learning that electricity does not only come from wall sockets and batteries. It comes from the metabolic labor of organisms too small to see. That lesson does not exist in any textbook I have read, but it exists in a bucket of mud on a classroom shelf. The principle that lit 300 streetlights in Amsterdam scales down to your windowsill and up to a rice paddy in Indonesia. The physics is identical at every level. Now sit with this for a moment. There are an estimated 1.5 billion households on this planet. Hundreds of millions of them have at least one potted plant inside. Every single one of those plants has been leaking electricity into its pot for its entire life. And not one person in that household knew it was happening. Every garden bed you have ever tended was dumping voltage into the ground beneath your knees. Every wetland, every marsh, every forest floor on Earth is running a continuous electrochemical reaction powered by sunlight, maintained by bacteria, and fueled by the oldest energy capture system in biology. We paved over it. We mowed it. We composted it. We never once thought to put a wire in the mud and listen to what the soil was trying to tell us. Here is what makes this fundamentally different from every other energy technology that exists. Solar panels degrade over 20 to 30 years. Wind turbines require constant maintenance. Lithium batteries lose capacity with every charge cycle and leave behind toxic mining waste when they die. A plant microbial fuel cell does none of those things. The carbon felt does not corrode. The bacteria reproduce themselves endlessly. The plant grows, flowers, and can be repotted when it outgrows its home. The entire system is alive. When something alive falters, it recovers. When a fuel cell loses performance, you add fresh compost and the bacterial colony rebuilds. When the plant reaches the end of its natural life, you plant a new one and the cycle restarts. There is no waste stream. The only chemical byproduct is water. And while the system runs, the plant is actively pulling carbon dioxide out of the air to build the sugars that feed the bacteria, which generate the electricity. This technology is not net zero. It is carbon negative. It cleans the atmosphere while producing power. I want to leave you with one final image. There are an estimated 390 billion trees on Earth, over 300,000 species of flowering plants. Every single one of them pushes sugars through its roots into the soil. Every single one of them feeds communities of bacteria that release electrons as a metabolic waste product. The total electrochemical energy flowing through the soils of this planet every single day is a number almost too large to comprehend. We are standing on a living battery the size of a continent, and we have been too busy building coal plants to notice. We tap into the tiniest fraction of that energy with a piece of carbon fabric and 2 wires, and we get a glowing light from a pot of mud. That alone should change how you think about what is under your feet. But the researchers at Wageningen are not finished. Their most recent published work confirms that nanomaterial-enhanced electrodes and optimized microbial communities are pushing power densities higher with each passing year. New electrode designs using activated carbon granules and graphene composites are showing efficiency gains that were not possible 5 years ago. The theoretical ceiling of this technology has not been reached. The researchers who built it believe it may not even be close. You do not have to wait for that ceiling. You can build the present version today. 1 pot, 1 plant, 2 pieces of carbon felt, 2 wires, 5 minutes of setup, and the bacteria that have been sitting in your garden soil for millions of years waiting for someone to give them a job. The materials cost less than a dinner for 2. The system runs for years. It asks nothing of you except water and a sunny window. And when someone visits your home and notices that faint red glow in the corner, and they ask what it is, and you tell them it is an LED powered by a potted plant and the bacteria living in its soil, they will not believe you. They will walk over. They will look for the hidden battery. They will check for a cord behind the shelf. And when they find nothing, when they realize the light is coming from mud and roots and invisible organisms doing what they have done since the beginning of life on this planet, something will shift in how they see the world. That is what this technology does before it ever powers a streetlight. It changes what people believe is possible. The soil is not dead. It is electric, and it has been waiting for you to notice. If this story changed the way you look at the simple plants in your home, in the soil beneath your feet, please subscribe and like this video. We are uncovering the hidden biological secrets that have been buried for far too long. Let's cultivate a more enlightened future together. The next breakthrough in nature's hidden treasury will be revealed very soon.